Benedict XVI announcing just a little over half an hour ago that he is stepping down as leader of the Catholic Church. This is an unprecedented move in modern times.
It's a scandal. They've done things that don't look clean.
Lost a huge amount of money. The Vatican is accusing some outside consultants, fund managers of defrauding it. And
in a city smaller than Central Park lies one of the most mysterious financial powerhouses on Earth. For centuries, the Vatican has operated behind closed doors. But how does a country with no taxes, no exports, and fewer than 1,000 residents manage billions? Chapter 1. The Power of the Invisible Hand. Vatican City is just 110 acres wide, nestled inside Rome like a sovereign pearl in the middle of Italy. It has no army, no agriculture, and no traditional economy. Yet, its financial influence extends far beyond its borders, touching everything from global real estate to the stock market. Here's what most people don't realize. The Vatican is not just a country. It's a global network of investments, charities, and assets, all tied together by one of the oldest governing institutions in the world, the Holy See. And if you want to understand how the Vatican makes money, you have to split it in two. Vatican City, the physical, visible state, and the Holy See, the international spiritual and political machine behind it. While tourists marvel at the Sistine Chapel ceiling, deep behind those sacred walls, money is moving. So where does it come from? Chapter 2. Donations or business? The Holy See's true revenue engine. It all begins with faith. Millions of Catholics around the world send in donations known as Peter's Pence, a tradition going back to the 8th century. These offerings are often made in trust, supporting the Pope's charitable works. But here's the twist. Only part of that money goes to the poor. The rest? It's invested. The Holy See acts much like a global investment fund. It uses donation reserves to buy shares in companies, invest in real estate, and acquire bonds. Some financial experts describe this as a faith-based portfolio, meaning the Holy See avoids companies that clash with church teachings. No money goes to birth control manufacturers, for example. Gambling, arms, and questionable pharmaceuticals? Off limits.
L'anno economico è enorme stato per il Vaticano, cioè il Vaticano non ci ha guadagnato.
And say that maybe at that moment in time we had come across something we shouldn't have seen.
I was talking to a source who told me, in the Vatican, the important thing is not who you know, but it's what you know about who you know.
Historically, the Vatican favored conservative, long-term positions. It held onto proven Italian companies, old money, slow returns. But in recent decades, that strategy has changed. Now the Vatican invests in European currencies, global bonds, and even stocks traded on the New York Stock Exchange. But just how much is it all worth? That's the million-dollar or perhaps billion-dollar mystery, because the Holy See doesn't release detailed public statements. While some insiders estimate the Vatican's total wealth in the tens of billions, no one outside knows the real number, and even less is known about how it's managed. Chapter 3. The Vatican Bank, a secret within a secret. The most misunderstood and controversial entity in the Vatican's financial empire is the Vatican Bank. Its official name? The Institute for the Works of Religion, but most know it by its more mysterious nickname, the Vatican Bank. Founded in 1942 by Pope Pius XII, it has no branches, no tellers, no public-facing services. Yet in 2023 alone, it generated $33.2 million in income and managed $5.9 billion in assets. This is where things get murky. Over the decades, the Vatican Bank has been linked to scandals, secret accounts, and even criminal investigations. Accusations of money laundering, stories of embezzlement. One case after another chipped away at its credibility. When Pope Francis assumed the papacy in 2013, he inherited not just a church in moral crisis, but a financial system rotting from within. His approach was clear: root out corruption, increase transparency, and reform the IOR from top to bottom. In June 2013, just months into his papacy, Francis created a special commission to study the IOR and chart a path forward. By April 2014, a new vision emerged. The IOR would not be dismantled, as some speculated, but transformed. That same year, the Vatican launched its first ever public website for the IOR and released an annual report for the first time in history. It was a tiny window cracked open, but enough for the world to peer inside. Then came the 2022 bombshell. Pope Francis signed a rescript mandating that all financial resources of the Holy See be consolidated within the IOR. This declaration made the IOR the sole custodian of all Vatican assets, stripping power from other offices and firmly centralizing control. It was a revolutionary shift, a clear sign the Pope meant business. While the Vatican made symbolic reforms, the real test was what it did when scandals broke inside its walls. In 2010, Italian authorities froze 23 million euros held by the IOR, suspecting violations of anti-money laundering laws. Though the funds were later released, the message was clear. Italian prosecutors were no longer turning a blind eye. Then came Monsignor Nunzio Scarano, nicknamed Monsignor 500 for his habit of carrying 500 euro notes.
This ends up caring because in the end they want to know where their money is going. Catholics expect, and rightly so, the Church to hold itself to a much higher moral standard than a corporation or an NGO or even a government. They expect a higher level of accountability. And I think the Church is learning some very hard lessons about transparency right now.
Scarano, a senior accountant in the Vatican's property office, was arrested in 2013 while allegedly trying to smuggle 20 million euros in cash from Switzerland to Italy via private jet. He claimed the money belonged to friends. The courts weren't convinced. Scarano was later charged with laundering millions through IOR accounts using false donations from offshore companies. He was convicted of making false accusations but acquitted of corruption. The IOR, to its credit, froze his accounts and cooperated with authorities. The fallout didn't stop there. In 2017, two former top officials of the IOR, Paolo Cipriani and Massimo Tulli, were convicted by a Roman court for failing to flag suspicious transfers. While they escaped the more serious charge of laundering $60 million, they were sentenced to prison and fined. And in 2018, prosecutors indicted former IOR president Angelo Caloia and his lawyer for embezzling over $60 million through real estate fraud. The alleged scheme? Undervalue Vatican properties, sell them cheap, and pocket the difference. It was Vatican Corruption 101, but with a 21st century price tag. In 2023, Pope Francis signed off on a revised statute for the IOR, codifying its purpose in unmistakable terms: to manage assets entrusted for religious or charitable works. It also made the governance structure more robust, dividing responsibility between a commission of cardinals, currently including heavyweights like Christoph Schönborn and Luis Antonio Tagle, a board of superintendents, led by investment professionals like Jean-Baptiste de François and Baron Michael Hintze, a directorate overseeing day-to-day operations under Gianfranco Mammi. Together, these bodies reflect a shift from clerical cronyism to professional oversight. Even with its reforms, the IOR remains an enigma. It doesn't have shareholders. It doesn't operate like a traditional private bank. Instead, it serves Catholic entities, religious orders, and charities. Over 14,000 clients in total. Its goal? Not profit, but protection. Protection of church funds, protection of donor intent, and, if we believe the critics, sometimes protection from scrutiny. But in a modern world demanding transparency, even the IOR must now walk a tightrope between tradition and reform. In Francis's Vatican, secrecy is no longer sacred. Chapter 4. The Vatican's Real Estate Empire. It's not just coins and donations. One of the Holy See's most powerful financial tools is something few ever talk about. It's real estate. The Vatican owns property in prime locations all over the world, from luxury apartments in London to sprawling landholdings in Switzerland, France, and Spain. Some of these buildings were gifts, others quiet acquisitions made decades ago. Either way, they now form a massive global footprint, one that generates steady rental income and appreciates over time. In fact, when you add up the value of Vatican-owned real estate, it could easily run into the tens of billions. But the Vatican isn't just a passive landlord. In 2020, a high-profile property scandal exploded involving a London building purchased with church funds. The deal was so complex and so questionable that it led to indictments, internal investigations, and the largest financial trial in Vatican history. This forced Pope Francis to act again, creating stricter oversight rules for real estate deals and enforcing stricter controls over who can invest church money. The message was clear: no more hidden empires. Still, many believe the full scope of Vatican real estate is underreported. And with properties often held in holding companies or church-affiliated trusts, it's nearly impossible for the public to track. So while Vatican buildings inspire faith and awe, they also generate rent.
He would say to me, "Dr. Milone, do you still feel independent today?" Now I ask myself the question, why did he ask me that question at that time?
If you have people coming in, outsiders, who are now acting with the authority of the Pope and can say, you need to open up your books. You need to show me what you're doing here. Like, what's this invoice? What did you spend this on? It sort of starts to ruffle some feathers.
We were working in an environment which had no financial culture, and that the people who had been managing most of the issues were clerics.
You had priests with no financial training moving hundreds of millions of euros around the world, investing in this, investing in that, handing over to different fund managers, and that is quite a strange situation.
Chapter 5, Vatican City Inc., Tourism, Stamps, and Spiritual Commerce. Now let's talk about the other half of this mystery Vatican City itself. Unlike the Holy See, Vatican City has a far more tangible economy. It may not export products or grow crops, but it does have something priceless: religious tourism. Each year, more than 5 million visitors flood into Vatican City to witness the glory of the Sistine Chapel, St. Peter's Basilica, and the Vatican museums. Admissions to those museums alone generate hundreds of millions annually. But that's not all. The Vatican also sells high-value stamps, coins, and publications. For collectors, these items are a goldmine. A single limited edition Vatican coin can sell for hundreds, sometimes thousands on the private market. And every euro earned from these sales goes into the city's coffers. So, while Vatican City may not function like a traditional nation, it behaves like a powerful boutique economy. One with no taxes, no debt, and no political parties, but lots of income. It employs about 4,800 people and runs everything from its postal service to its observatory. And all of it, every exhibit, every coin, every candle, is designed to do one thing: sustain the Church's mission. Chapter 6, the Vatican's diplomatic power. To truly understand the financial empire of the Vatican, one must also understand its global diplomatic footprint. Despite being the smallest country in the world, Vatican City wields outsized influence through one of the most sophisticated diplomatic corps on the planet. The Holy See maintains diplomatic relations with over 180 countries and holds permanent observer status at the United Nations. This diplomatic presence isn't merely ceremonial, it's strategic. It allows the Vatican to influence global policy, forge financial agreements, and maintain the protection of its assets under the guise of religious sovereignty. For example, the Holy See can secure beneficial treatment for its financial operations in countries with Catholic majorities or strong church ties. These diplomatic relationships also create a form of immunity, shielding certain operations from public scrutiny. The Vatican's global reach ensures that its financial activities are not just about money, they're about power, and they're protected by layers of statehood, canon law, and centuries-old privilege. Chapter 7, Opus Dei, the Knights of Malta and Vatican Finances. Two of the most whispered about institutions often linked to Vatican wealth and secrecy are Opus Dei and the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. Opus Dei, officially a personal prelature of the Catholic Church, is often portrayed as an ultra-conservative, secretive faction with deep connections in banking, media, and politics. While its members publicly deny any illicit involvement in Vatican finances, speculation has persisted about their role in shaping policy and shielding assets. The Knights of Malta, meanwhile, are a sovereign entity in international law, despite having no land other than a few buildings in Rome. Their diplomatic status and ancient banking ties have also raised eyebrows. The order operates hospitals and humanitarian efforts, but critics have accused them of acting as intermediaries for moving church money quietly around the world. Whether or not these entities are directly involved in financial improprieties is often debated, but one thing is clear: their influence, resources, and access to powerful networks give them a unique place in the Vatican's broader web of global power. Chapter 8, Asset Protection Through Sovereignty and Canon Law. What makes the Vatican's finances so difficult to scrutinize isn't just secrecy, it's structure. Vatican City is not bound by many of the financial disclosure requirements that other nations must follow. Its status as a sovereign entity, combined with the autonomy of religious orders and institutions like the IOR and APSA, allows it to operate in a legal and ethical gray zone. For instance, the Vatican is not a member of the European Union. so it doesn't fall under EU banking regulations. It also has its own legal system based on canon law and Vatican civil law, meaning that transparency rules common in the West often don't apply. This makes it almost impossible for external watchdogs to track or audit the flow of money within Vatican institutions unless voluntarily disclosed. In effect, the Vatican operates like a hybrid of a religious trust, a state, and a multinational corporation with the legal benefits of all three and the oversight of none. Chapter 9. Philanthropy or PR. The Vatican's humanitarian image. Publicly, the Vatican emphasizes its humanitarian role. Every year, the Holy See donates millions to disaster relief, education, refugee aid, and medical care. Catholic charities, under its direction, are often the first on the scene in times of crisis. Institutions like Caritas Internationalis channel significant funding into global development projects. But critics argue that this philanthropic image also serves a secondary purpose to justify the scale of the Church's financial operations and deflect attention from internal scandals. For example, the Peter's Pence collection, meant to help the poor, has reportedly been used in the past to cover Vatican administrative costs and even to invest in luxury real estate in London. This tension between charity and self-interest lies at the heart of the Vatican's financial identity. On one hand, it funds hospitals in Africa. On the other, it owns swanky buildings in Chelsea and shopping centers in Switzerland. This moral dissonance has sparked fierce debate within the Church itself. Some bishops and cardinals argue that the Vatican must lead by example and sell off non-essential holdings to fund social justice initiatives. Others believe that maintaining financial stability is essential for the long-term survival of the Church's mission. Pope Francis has frequently voiced frustration with what he calls the spiritual worldliness of certain Church officials, accusing some of pursuing personal or institutional gain under the cover of religion. One of the most symbolic acts of his papacy came in 2021 when he ordered the sale of the controversial London building purchased by the Secretariat of State, a property now forever linked with corruption allegations, shady brokers, and millions in losses. It wasn't just a financial move, it was a message. But whether that message will ripple through the deeper layers of Vatican bureaucracy is still unknown. Chapter 10. Digital currency and the Vatican's financial future. Looking forward, the Vatican faces an emerging challenge: digital transformation. As financial systems modernize and move toward cryptocurrencies, blockchain transparency, and decentralized finance, the Vatican finds itself at a crossroads. On one hand, embracing new technology could enhance transparency and streamline donations. Blockchain could allow Catholics worldwide to trace how their tithes are used, building trust and engagement. On the other hand, adopting digital systems poses risks to the Vatican's traditional control mechanisms. Transparency could expose internal dysfunction, and decentralization could undermine the Church's ability to funnel resources quietly. In 2023, the Vatican expressed interest in ethical uses of AI and digital finance, even hosting conferences on the subject. But implementation remains slow and controversial within more conservative factions. Still, as financial ecosystems evolve, the Holy See will need to make a choice: adapt or risk being left behind. Chapter 11. Cultural wealth, more than just money. Of course, the Vatican's wealth isn't only financial, it's cultural. St. Peter's Basilica, the Vatican Museums, and the Sistine Chapel attract over millions of visitors per year. The Vatican Library and Archives hold priceless documents and ancient codices, yet much of this cultural capital is underutilized or restricted from public access. Critics argue that if the Church truly wished to live out its social teachings, more of these cultural assets could be leveraged or sold to fund global humanitarian work. Still, defenders counter that these are not assets to be sold, but sacred heritage to be preserved. Michelangelo's ceiling is not just a painting, it is theology in pigment and plaster. This debate between sacred preservation and modern responsibility continues to define the Vatican's internal tug-of-war. Chapter 12. The future. Can the Vatican balance faith and finance? The biggest financial question facing the Vatican today isn't about secrecy. It's about sustainability. In 2024, the Holy See reported an income of $1.25 billion, but expenses reached $1.34 billion, a deficit of $90 million. And while recent reforms have slowed the bleeding, challenges remain. The Church faces an aging workforce, unfunded pensions, and rising costs across its institutions. Some insiders worry that if no major changes are made, the Vatican could be forced to cut salaries, lay off staff, or liquidate assets. That's not just a financial problem, it's a spiritual one. Because for many, the Church is not just a faith, it's a livelihood. So Pope Francis has set an ambitious goal: zero deficit spending, a balanced budget by the end of the decade. It's bold, it's difficult, but it may be necessary if the Vatican wants to keep its promises to the global poor, the clergy, and the faithful. That's the paradox of the Vatican's wealth. It's not there to be flaunted, it's there to be protected, multiplied, and ultimately given away. The Vatican may be the smallest country in the world, but its financial reach is massive. From secretive investments to global real estate, from donation-driven funds to coin-collecting economies, it operates like no other nation on earth. And while popes preach humility and service, the reality behind the walls of Vatican City is one of high-stakes financial strategy, global scrutiny, and eternal mission. The question isn't whether the Vatican is rich, it's whether it can remain financially faithful to the very values it was built on. Because when faith meets finance, the consequences echo across centuries. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this documentary insightful, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more deep dives like this. Thanks for watching.